Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Momentum Boost. I'm your host, Adrienne Gold Davis, and I'm delighted to be with you tonight. So, here at Momentum, it's the month where we're highlighting sisterhood. Now, this is a function that is not only made through biology, heaven knows, but also specifically through choice. Now, a month ago, I posed a question on Facebook to see what constitutes sisterhood in your minds, and I got hundreds of the most amazing responses. Some of them I made memes out of, you might have noticed, and they were from Momentum Sisters from around the world. So I picked a few for tonight just to share with you because they warmed my heart. The first one is from Ronnie Westmark Esty, and she said this. She said, "It's my tribe. It's my vault, my confidence, my village, my ride or die, my diary, my teachers, my mentors, my people who get me and accept me just the way I am, my people who know that when I say I'm fine, it's pure BS, and they don't stop pestering me until it's all out in the universe and that they have the solution." I love that one. And then Lorraine Fairbloom wonderfully said that it's an unspoken and or spoken connection shared amongst women. The sense of knowledge, of knowing, of understanding, and of feeling empathy for a sense of belonging through shared lived experiences. It's supporting one another for the simple reason of wanting women to live happy and healthy lives. There were so many tremendous responses, and I, for one, was just blown away by all of your thoughts and sentiments. They moved me. Well, joining us today are two more Momentum sisters, and they are real life sisters as well. Lee Lazarus and Janine Kernoff. 20 years ago, these two sisters found themselves at a work and life crossroads. So although successful sales and marketing communication professionals, they were riding the Silicon Valley.com boom, they just were not impressed with the status quo. And like many talented women with entrepreneurial ambition in their blood, and theirs, I think, thanks to their immigrant parents, they started to ask themselves, can we do better than this? And what would it take to start our own thing? How many of us have wondered the same things ourselves? So with little money, no office, but a lot of sisterly passion and collaboration, the presentation company, TPC, was born in 2001. And over the decades, their company grew. And today, well, they work with some of the biggest organizations in the world, including Nestle, who I personally keep in business nonstop, and Facebook and McDonald's. But looking back, these sisters had to learn to zig and zag with the demands of their business, like we all do in life, right? They had a desire to have families, to figure out a way to achieve success without sacrificing a whole and balanced life in the process. Balanced, juggled, I don't know, how do you want to put it? But how do you give to others, to each other, and still have the courage to choose yourself? And is there something, and this is the key because it's Sisterhood Month, is there something about being sisters and successful sisters that all relationships, whether they're business or personal, could learn from? So I ask you to join me in welcoming this lovely duo. Welcome, Janine and Lee. Hi, ladies.
Hello. It's so
Hi,
great to be
Adrienne.
here.
Oh, it's such an honor to see you again. It makes me happy just to see your beautiful faces. And I'm so happy for everything that's happened to you. Okay, you're sisters. You created this incredibly successful company. You just published your first book, and you have families with young children. Everybody seems to be happy. Nobody's ripping each other's hair out. Like, is this for real? How could this be for real? What does it take? Kind of thing up. Take me back to where it began. Fill me in a little bit, okay?
Yeah, when we hear it's so funny when you hear all that. It's like, did this really happen? Yeah, we were crazy enough, Lee, 20 years ago to start a business together as real life sisters, and we've never looked back. And it was back in 2001 that we got our start. We had that itch, I think, that a lot of entrepreneurs, especially women, have, where the status quo wasn't cutting it for us. We saw a better way. And I, at the time, was in at Yahoo in sales training and later as an on-camera webcast host. Lee, I think you were in the Marcom space
Yeah.
in market research. And we just saw just so many talented business people trying to be heard, trying to get their story out and not making it easy for their audience to figure out, what do you want me to know or do? And so we put our minds together and yes, created a business together. And yeah, 20 years in the making and a book. So it is exciting. And I wouldn't say that it's been perfect along the way. Would you, Lee? Like, we are human at the end of the day.
Lee, has it been perfect along the way?
No, I think if we're honest with ourselves, there's always highs and lows. And I remember that first 5 years, we didn't make much. And that's usually, they say, that make or break it window. You know, how much grit are you going to put in the game? How much sweat equity? And Janine and I really had to look hard at each other and say, are we in it for the long haul, or are we just looking for a quick fix? And that, man, that was some tough times. But once we got through that hump, well, the other side has been pretty sweet.
So that fascinates me because, there's a family story that you come from. You have your shared experiences and your shared stories from your family, but there's nothing that could have prepared you to step into the role of business people together. There really is no training ground in the household for sisters to put aside all of those things. This is a story in and of itself. And I know that your business is based thematically on the idea of telling stories. Can you tell me about your story? What comes into a story that can create tension, how you change stories midstream, and what storytelling means to you and to your business?
Yeah, I can start and then Lee fill in. But storytelling, it's the core of what we all do, right? As humans, we come into this world as story listeners. Many of us are read to as children. And it's how we connect. It's how we create community and trust. I think it's why organizations like Momentum are so powerful, because you're helping women tell their story or uncover their story. And so this thing that is so innate in all of us, what we've seen is that it's a lot of business people opt out, and we say, oh, storytelling, that's for Hollywood script writers, like I'm a product, engineer, or I'm in sales. Like, I don't have to tell a story. And so I think people almost are triggered by the word storytelling, especially in the business world. And we're really changing all that. And we're showing folks how you can still organize your ideas and all your data, because we're not short on data these days, and frame it in a narrative that makes it easy for your audience to quickly lean in and understand, oh, okay, I get it. I see what you're trying to tell me. So yeah, storytelling is kind of at the center of what we do. And, what makes a great story? People are at the center of great stories. And yes, there's other elements like conflict, but I think, Lee, wouldn't you say we've always kind of been a people first company and really putting people at the center, whether we're working with customers or even our own team. So storytelling is like kind of almost, yes, we have a story here and we're helping others tell theirs.
So
Yeah.
answer me something, Lee. So give us a kind of concrete example about when you would take a bunch of disparate ideas and turn it into a story. What does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we always say storytelling is the why, what, how of a good narrative, right? Those are the kind of key components. And you always have to have the setting and the characters that are really humanizing and setting context. And then you need to have a little bit of tension or conflict to get me to lean in and want to care and take notice. And then we also talk about the fact that you need to have a big idea. And the big idea for us is kind of this one big throughput that connects the dots of the narrative. And it's really the strategic maybe insight, or it's the glue I like to describe it of as the narrative, so that if your time's cut short, what is that one thing that you want people to remember, right? When they walk out of that room or hang up that phone call or Zoom. And then, of course, the easy part, which we're traditionally all really great at, is the resolution, right? Look at me. Here are all the things I'm fabulous at, or here's the product or service, or this is why the kids need to empty the dishwasher. It's all the stuff that you actually have to do. I call it the non-sexy part of the storytelling. It's usually the recommendation or the facts. And that's what we found over the years people get hung up on. They're really good at making the recommendation of why we need to do something, but they miss out the reasons of how to do it and all the other stuff that surrounds it. So we try to really take a very human approach to this. and also take care of the people that are not making the TED Talks, right? Or they're not developing scripts for Hollywood. We're taking care of the everyday person.
Something struck me as you're speaking, and tell me what you think of this. Women are uniquely being much more emotionally narrative based in our communications. We're uniquely talented at this. And I wonder if sisters who grew up, with hearing similar stories and writing your own, how would you describe the female component to constructing a narrative? What gets in its way and what makes it more magical?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, yeah, especially as moms, but for sure as females.
Empathy.
Okay, you take it, Lee. You got it. No, I love that.
I do. I do think empathy is an underlying theme that comes out in a lot of narratives by females in particular, which is lacking in many other narratives of its nature. And then I think that we also have a great skill in seeing holistically the picture at the 30,000 foot view. Not only the details, but we can often step back and take pause and look at how the building blocks come together. And that is a gift. And sometimes we just need a little bit of help putting them in the right order or framing them up in a way that is not confrontational or not creating people to be on the defense, or at least open to listening, right? We need to have so if you ask me what some of the negative can be, is sometimes we just don't have the confidence to serve up the conflict. But we have to. We need to.
Do you think that sisters in general or women in general, I mean, in business, there's a certain element of aesthetic distance, right? You're being hired, you're being asked to do that. But what about in interpersonal relationships? For example, you two sisters, is there ever a time that you need courage to serve up the truth to each other?
I mean, I think that, yeah, we've been doing this for 20 years. So, yeah, there's always conflict at times. Sometimes it's subtle conflict. Sometimes there's baby conflicts that escalate to a larger conflict. And that's true in any story, right? I think the key is making sure that you have a really clear understanding of how you navigate the conflict, right? And as Lee said, it's about having that big idea. Like, what is that one thing that you want the other person to know or do differently? And so sometimes the conflict can show up and it can be really loud and disruptive, but it's actually not about the conflict, that there's something larger that needs to get addressed. And we've navigated that. We're still navigating that. I mean, our business is growing now. We're really at a transition point where we're scaling. And with that comes an adjustment in how we show up every day to our team and what is expected of us and what our clients expect of us. So it's not the same old, right? The status quo is not what it was 20 years ago. So I think that it's really natural and normal to kind of have to navigate the conflict in both our life and then, of course, the stories that we're trying to tell. I don't know, Lee, is there anything you'd add to that?
I was just going to transition that. I think in any situation where there's conflict, you have to have your people, right? You need to have your community. You need to have maybe your coaches, your advisors that you can turn to, that sometimes can just bring an outside non-emotional perspective. Because let's face it, emotions do get in the way. Because again, we have that empathy gene. So sometimes we turn to outside experts to provide that counsel and guidance.
Well, this is a very deeply Jewish concept, obviously. We learn in our sources that you're supposed to acquire a friend and you're supposed to make yourself a teacher. You're supposed to go outside of your own, little box in order to be able to pull yourself to a greater perspective, which brings me to my next question. Do you think that, I know that you are both Jewish women, obviously, Momentum sisters. Can you think of any Jewish values that may have helped build what you've built here or that you depend upon or proactively put into your sisterhood and corporation?
I think at the core, respect, right? Respect for each other. We've always had that. I think we were raised, our parents were immigrants. We emigrated with our parents when we were very young from England in 1978. And so we were, it was just the four of us for so long. We didn't have a community yet at day one. And so I think our parents, there was just this, like, we're on the same team. That was like a message. Don't you remember, Lee? It was like very much entrenched, like figure it out. You are sisters. You're lucky to have each other and you're on the same team. So work together.
Mhm.
And I think that respect was key. It's helped us build a foundation of respect for each other as we've grown a business together and even navigated life together. Um, I think also community and giving back at the core is a big part of who we are. And I think it's why we like to over deliver to our clients too, because there's this sense of like, wait, no, we want to like do a little bit more and over delight. And sometimes that can get us into trouble, where how do you scale and delight clients as well? So I think those are what come to mind for me is just respect and community and giving back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So DACA and
Yes.
not separate yourself from the community. Beautiful. Do you have anything to add to that, Lee, do you think?
I think the concept of emunah, if I'm saying that correctly,
You
it,
are
the
faithfulness.
right, just have this trust and this faith that we're going to be okay, and that we're going to do this the right way, and that our values are going to guide us to make the right decisions and to be ethical and to be transparent, which again, as Janine alluded to, I think that set us apart from actually a lot of companies out there. And we are very fortunate that we actually hear that a lot from our clients. Like they share that they are so appreciative, for example, of the grace we gave them during COVID, that we didn't hold them accountable to maybe trainings that they needed to cancel at the last minute, or that they couldn't commit to future trainings in the moment. And we got recognized for having that trust and that understanding and compassion. So those are things that I think we like to pay it forward and live by.
Beautiful. Both of you, beautiful. Yeah, you sound, things have been very successful, sweat equity, and you're also your empathy and your giving back and all of that. But this notion of compassion and empathy for your clients as well as for each other. Now, I've heard it said that you can have it all, just not all at the same time. So how does that work out? Being mothers, I know you're making a bat mitzvah this year soon, right, Lee?
Yes.
How does it work to be entrepreneurs, to be accountable and responsible for huge corporations? Not the least corporation, of course, is your own family. How do you find that balance? Is it possible to create a balance?
Yeah. I don't love that word these days because I don't think it's possible, right? We're the CEO of our company, we're the CEO of our family. And, everyone in particular these past 15 months has had a lot of, feelings and emotions that are added on, the complexity. So we've been psychologists as therapists as well, I think, for many of us. But I think what I've learned, and Janine can, speak for herself, I try to outsource the unimportant things, the things that create noise, that are the distractors that take away from the joy and the quality time that I can be having with my kids, or I can be showing up to when there are, sports teams and games going back on. So I have to make choices, and I also have to be great at blocking and owning and managing my calendar and my time, because I have learned that other people will control that for you if you don't set boundaries.
Whoa, is that your experience as well, Janine?
Yeah, I mean, I will give Lee all the credit. She's way better at balancing and managing her household and business. Like she's just the bigger sister, and I look up to her that way,
22 months bigger.
Yes, 22 months older and so much more wiser she's really good at multitasking, managing, and not getting us flustered. Like I definitely I'm calling big sis all the time. Like, all right, how do I handle this one now? I got to show up to that, training, and this is happening on the home front. Like, so we talk through a lot of stuff. So it's so great to have my person, and Lee has always been that person. I think this last year has been incredibly challenging to so many families, so many moms. I've certainly felt very, very tested. And as someone who likes to have everything kind of in control, whether that's childcare and like work, this year really showed us like, guess what? All of that's going out the window. And yeah, just giving ourselves a little grace and recognizing that those around us are also going through the same thing, that it almost was kind of an icebreaker with so many of our Fortune 500 customers, like getting on calls and they're like, wait, hold on. I got to say goodnight to my kids or say hello to my kids or say goodbye, and I'm like, oh, I'm doing that too. I mean, this is one of the first interviews that because I've been doing interviews on our book since February. And it's like the first day where my kids aren't here. And it is eerily silent and I'm loving it. I'm sorry. Like it's so amazing because I have had to spend so much time saying, guys, mom's on a Zoom call. Mom's doing this. Can you be super quiet? And they're like, you're so demanding, mom? Like, why aren't you hanging out with us? So it's been trying. And I agree with you, Lee, the whole world of balance. It's one day I feel it and one day I don't. So I think we're always a work in progress on kind of trying to navigate everything, work and kids and family.
Yeah, you can have it all, but not all at the same time. I think you said something that was very astute. I'm going to reiterate it and make sure I heard it correctly. You said it's not about balance, it's about boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
If we're constantly, there's this idea that if you are on a tightrope and you feel like you're falling this way, you should redirect further this way. There needs to be certain boundaries that are sacrosanct, but they also have to be flexible enough, and you have to have enough empathy to be able to move with the times. So speaking of boundaries, you bound some of your wisdom into a book. Tell me a little bit about the book. Tell me about how it approaches the values that are important to you, your mission of your company. What's in there that we can all learn from?
You mean this little guy?
Okay, there it is.
I can't help it, right?
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. Yes, we're very excited about this book. This is 20 years in the making, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been serving up the concepts in this book, which is really around storytelling in business. We called it everyday business storytelling because it's just that. It's storytelling for everyday people every day. It's not if you're doing some fancy TED talk, although you can certainly use the principles. And it's not if you have a team of, script writers and like the whole thing's done for you. This is for everyday folks, you and me, that have to show up in our lives, whether their business or our nonprofit lives, our volunteer lives, or even our home lives, to communicate stories and to organize our ideas and data into a narrative. And it's, we're so proud of it because we've been doing this for 20 years. It's in the form of workshops, but this was our chance to bottle it up in a book. And I think it was a bucket list item, Lee, like way back when we were.
Most definitely.
What would we want to do? And we kind of entered into it thinking, okay, yeah, let's write a book, never thinking it would be something bigger than it is. And it's really turning out to kind of touch a lot of people. I think we're striking a chord. I think that, at least from what we're seeing, the market has needed an approachable kind of, I can hold on to this and apply this today in my life and build stories, versus it being sort of this, unreachable. It's really for everyday communications.
Yeah,
and
it's practical. Is what
it
we
is
hear
very
the most,
practical.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Give a practical, tangible example of taking an everyday series of dots and connecting them together into a narrative. Take your time. I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Well, sorry. The shameless plug.
Do it for momentum.
So you're asking me to tell a story for momentum?
Yeah.
When I think about, so I would start first with the setting and characters. Is like, we're all busy moms leading busy lives and trying to keep it all together. And I think the conflict of that is sometimes we lose ourselves, right? We lose sight of kind of what we're all about. And the big idea is we're at the center of our households, right? I think when I think about what momentum stands for, you're tapping in to moms who are at the center of the household. I always remember that when we, before we went on our trip to Israel together, 5-6 years ago now. So when I think about that big idea, the one thing I'd want to remember is that moms are at the center. Moms are at the center of the universe, right? And the world. So we got to start with moms. So the resolution in my mind with what you guys are doing is we're going to feed the soul of these mothers so that they can come back filled up, right? With knowledge and wisdom and just filling up their bucket so that they have enough to give to the rest of their family. So that was me on the spot kind of riffing, but at the core, that's what I think about with momentum. And it's why you guys have such an incredible following, and you're helping all kinds of moms find their story and share it with others. So I think it's pretty brilliant.
Now, for those of us who are not perhaps corporate, do you think that that book will give us tools to express our stories within our homes, within our families, our relationships? Does it work outside of business?
Absolutely. I actually had to use it recently for an HOA. You know, I have a lake, house, and I had to like convince this group of people I'd never met before. I was the new neighbor, and I'm trying to solve for the digital divide that's going on in rural counties where there's children that don't have access to, internet, and there's certain parts of the neighborhood that do. And I had to come in and create a narrative to an audience, again, I was not super familiar with, and convince them that this was something that they should invest their time and dollars into. And I took the principles in our book. I set this, I did the setting. I went in and introduced the characters. Then I introduced the big idea, the conflict, then the big idea, and then the resolution. And I left that meeting with 100% of folks on board to commit to solving this digital divide in this rural county. So that is a real example of applying that to an everyday situation that I actually was really nervous to serve up, because I was sticking my neck out into a community that I was not brought up in. I didn't have a lot of history in, but I was really passionate about solving for this problem. But I knew that I had to not get people on the defensive. I had to position it clearly.
Wow. Speaking of Jewish values, this is a way to create shalom bayit, peace in the household, is to understand how to present these ideas and these conflicts, stories with a resolution. I'm loving this.
Especially teenagers, right? They don't want to be told the resolution. It's almost like collaborative problem solving is what we're disguising.
They need
in
a
the
clear
world of
why,
storytelling.
right? They need a clear why when you ask them to do something.
I'm going to give you just a throw out there scenario. Everybody else is allowed to sleep with their phones in their room, and you take mine away at 11 o'clock at night. Everyone else has open internet, and you're still monitoring things.
So how would you tell your son or daughter, like, hey, that's not okay, you can't have it by the nightstand? Is that the question?
I think so.
Lee, you want to take that? Or you I didn't know we were like on the spot, Adrienne.
I don't have an answer for it either, but these are the kinds of conflict resolution issues.
Yeah.
This is game theory. And in many ways, what you're talking about is game theory. But,
yeah, well, and I think the first thing, so regardless of the topic, because you're right, it could be, you're trying to have a conversation with your teenager, or it could be your customer. It really doesn't matter. We always say, start with first walking in their shoes. Who is your audience? So in this case, I would say, well, let's dig in. What is going on in their world? Everybody else has their phone. They get to plug it in by their heads if they're, at sleep at night or whatever. And so it's just like, what else is going on in their world? What do they care about? What challenges are they facing? So there's almost like a deep dive before we can even build the narrative. We always talk about storytelling, but I think there's a big part of story building or story doing. Before you can tell the story, you got to figure out what the story is. So that's step one, is like, know your audience and what do they care about? Because as you said, Lee, having that empathy and knowing
what's the root cause. Yeah.
Right. And so once we kind of get clear on them, not you, because if you come in with what you want, it's going to fall on deaf ears. Right. And we see that. We see it in the business world, but we all experience it in our home lives too. So it's understanding them. And then it's putting together those pillars of storytelling, as we said, setting, characters, conflict, big idea, resolution. And, even something as simple as your big idea, what is that one thing you want your son or daughter to remember? You can't craft that until you're really clear on the conflict. So what is the conflict of this story? What is so wrong with having that phone by the bedside? Well, there's probably a lot of reasons, right? And I'm guessing some of them you could cite medically, right? Like, I don't think it's healthy to have this phone physically by your bed, but there's probably a host of other reasons too, morally, ethically, values-wise in your family. I just want to say that when especially in our book, it's not like you just sit down and the story you need to tell just sort of magically appears. There is some work to be done. And part of it is really, again, knowing your audience first, and then digging into these story pillars and iterating. My goodness, like, how many times, like, the best stories are sometimes very iterative and collaborative. So I would say in this case, collaborate with your husband or your partner to be like, all right, are we really clear on what the story is we want to tell? Because that's when it's going to be heard. That's when your audience, in this case, maybe your son or daughter, is going to say, okay, I hear you. And then, they're going to have a rebuttal. But I think if we can frame it with a clear why and what and how, I think it makes it a lot easier to get our ideas across.
So you see, you're excellent on one foot, both of you. Okay, share this with me just to wrap it up, although I could ask you a million questions, because I have a feeling that business marketing and the kind of work you do is an untapped resource for family management as well. I think that what you do for a brand, you could do for, the Brandsteins. I think you probably have become therapists. What is your North Star? What guides you on a day-to-day basis? I'll start with you, Lee.
I think always speak your truth, stay centered and humble. That's a big one. I think that, again, I'll just go back to what we hear from the people that surround us, that we've never gotten ahead of ourselves, even though we've had great successes. Now this book has, been a bestseller, and we've been in Forbes and Harvard Business Review, and you name it. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. What matters is that we're happy and that we are surrounded by good people and we're finding joy. And I think that to me just keeps, at least for myself, grounded, and making time for my health, right? Because if I'm not healthy, then it all doesn't really matter.
I'll say. Beautiful. And you, my Janine? What might
I'm just marinating on what Lee said. I love that. It reminds me of when we were kids and our parents, being immigrants, always kind of raised us with this mantra of, follow your passion and don't be afraid to take risks. And they, of course, demonstrated that. And I realized that we're now demonstrating that to our kids, and we have daughters, and that's pretty exciting. When I think about my North Star at the end of the day, showing up for our kids and letting them see, like, this is what it looks like when two moms get together and work, or two sisters, whether they're blood related or not. And I feel proud of that. I realize that we are doing something we love. We have the passion, and we are taking risks, and it's not always easy, but it's a lot of fun. And we're surrounded by really amazing people. And then being able to model that to our kids who are watching on the sidelines, it's pretty awesome. I love it.
Well, on behalf of all of us at Momentum and behalf of women, thank you both for taking the risk and working through the grit of it, as you said, and role modeling for all of us what is possible when women are sisters, literally or figuratively, put their collective brains, energy, passions, and commitment together and build something from the ground up that should last for as long as you want it to do, and to be deeply successful. Congratulations to both of you. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your strength and your intellect with us today. You're amazing, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Adrienne.
you.
So
Such
fun
an
to
honor.
talk with you.
Well, let's thank Lee and Janine for being here with us today. They're extraordinary women. And I can't stop thinking about this idea that which propels business, that the way you market your brand, your family needs to be your brand too. You have to have a vision. You have to have a narrative. You have to expect a bit of conflict. I think that there's a real potential for learning from industry into the personal realm. Anyway, Lee and Janine are offering us 30% discount on their new book through their distributor, which is called Porchlight. So I think we're going to put it up in the chat. It's a page with a link to Porchlight, and it has that discount, as well as the other alternative. You can buy it from Amazon, but without the discount. So we're putting that up for you. But from myself, Adrienne Gold Davis, and from all of us here in Momentum Land, around the world, just remember that as we learn and grow together in our business, in our personal lives, in general, that the highest form of wisdom will always be kindness.